Episode 187 of the Outdoor Biz Podcast with Gregg Bleakney, founder of WhereNext, a global creative agency and production company. Today's episode is brought to you by Audible. If you use Audible, then you know. If you're not, you're missing out. It's like having a library in your phone, and I use it a lot. Audible helps the miles fly by on the road or in the air as I'm enjoying great books I discover or are recommended to me by friends. Get a free audiobook download and 30-day free trial at audibletrial.com/theoutdoorbizpodcast. There are over 180,000 titles to choose from for your iPhone, Android, Kindle, or MP3 player. Start your 30-day free trial with Audible today. audibletrial.com/theoutdoorbizpodcast. I believe achieving success in the outdoor biz is dependent upon embracing the outdoor lifestyle and learning from outdoor leaders that came before you. If you agree, then listen up for tips, advice, and hacks about growing or starting your career in the outdoor biz. My name is Rick Sayes. Welcome to the Outdoor Biz Podcast. In this episode, Gregg Bleakney talks about the unique full-service creative agency and production company he founded with headquarters in Bogota, Colombia, and some of the unique intricacies of operating a business there. If you're thinking about starting a podcast, visit ricksayes.com/podcast cheat sheet and get my 10-step guide to producing your first podcast. Go to ricksayes.com/podcast cheat sheet and begin producing your podcast today. That's ricksayes.com/podcast cheat sheet. Hey, Gregg, welcome to the show.
Thanks.
Good to be catching up with you. So you're in mid-travel somewhere. Is that what you were saying earlier?
I am, yeah. I'm in the middle of a 3.5-week travel stint where I've pretty much been in a different place every night. I'm in Miami on a layover.
Wow.
Going down to Guyana. And I've never been before, so I'm looking forward to seeing what that country's all about.
That'll be pretty cool down there. Yeah, you working on a project down there?
We are, yeah. We're working with our Ministry of Tourism and the U.S. Ambassador. We're going to be talking about best practices for future tourism for that country and taking a look at all the options that they are considering for their future tourism campaigns.
Wow, very exciting. So tell us about your introduction into the outdoors. How'd you get excited about outdoor activities?
Yeah, so I would say growing up, I did not come from a family that was participated much in or at all in outdoor activities. Mostly we were a sports family, so my weekends were spent like running track or playing soccer or basketball. And I think in 8th grade I got cut from the basketball team, so I started exploring the outdoors just on my own with friends who didn't play basketball. So I started skiing, and then in high school when I got my first car when I turned 16, I actually went out and started hiking for the first time around the Olympic Peninsula. I grew up on Bainbridge Island, so there's a ton of places to go out there.
Oh man, yeah,
go hiking.
One of the outdoor meccas up there. Holy cow!
Yeah. So I found a couple of guys in high school who liked hiking. They had more experience than me, and we just went out on the weekends and explored the trails
Very cool.
near Bainbridge Island. Yeah.
Fun. So was it mainly hiking? Did you get into skiing, fishing, any of that kind of stuff, paddling up there?
I did not in high school. Basically it was day hikes was about as far as I got, and kind of coming back. Sometimes I remember sleeping in the car, but I didn't know how to pitch a tent. I didn't know anything about the outdoors at that point. But I can say that the first time I really was introduced to the outdoors was a talk at REI that I went to at the Seattle REI, and I met a guy named Gregg McCormick, and he's kind of this quintessential lifelong outdoorsman. And he was talking about a bicycle trip he did through Alaska, and I thought it was just so cool. And I got his contact information, and I followed up afterwards, said thanks for the presentation. And then about a year later, he randomly called me back when you'd actually call people.
Yeah.
And he said he was going back up to Alaska to finish. He always wanted to do the pipeline route from the top of Alaska to the bottom of Alaska along the pipeline on a bicycle. And he asked me if I wanted to go, and he'd be willing to kind of teach me the tools of the trade of bike touring and camping and being in the wilderness. So he was looking for a travel companion and someone to split costs with and just enjoy the journey with. And he took me under his wing, and we had this incredible 10-day trip through Alaska and learned so much from him.
That's awesome. That's like a great apprenticeship program there. That's fabulous.
Yeah. Yeah, actually, it's a friendship and mentorship. And
yeah, right.
Close,
all
to
the
this
above.
day, probably 15, 20 years later.
Wow. So you never had a traditional outdoor job? You never worked retail or at guiding or anything?
No, I did not.
Okay,
Nope.
got you. Interesting, yeah. So from software sales to visual storyteller, I think a lot of people have read or listened to your story about how you got into selling and out of. How did you know you couldn't go back to selling software, though? What was the trigger for that?
Yeah, so after college, I got involved in technology in the startup world, and then Oracle Software and a software company in Seattle. And it was a really interesting career. I liked selling. I think I was pretty good at selling.
Yeah, pretty lucrative, you said, right?
Yeah, it's lucrative. And it was fun. And, I was a young guy out of college, and one thing I loved about it is that I could travel a lot. So I get these frequent flyer packages from Southwest. And that was back if you flew 4 Southwest Air flights. They'd mail you a voucher for a free flight in the mail. Right. So my boss at that time, when I was working in Seattle, taught me the tricks of the trade on Southwest. If I was booking a trip to Phoenix, for example, from Seattle, instead of just going on Southwest and buying Seattle Phoenix, I'd buy Seattle to LA round trip and then LA Phoenix.
Oh, right.
So you'd be halfway there just from one sales trip. So I started racking up all these vouchers, and I could go take off on the weekend and travel. And I think that just almost was self-defeating for the Southwest job, because I started falling in love more with trying to snag these vouchers and doing these cool weekend trips.
Playing the game, that was more fun.
Yeah, playing the game, but it was all this kind of wanderlust that had built up, and I was really enjoying that. And another friend of mine from college, he lost his mother to diabetes, and he asked me if I wanted to ride my bicycle down the coast, the Pacific Coast, with him, and help raise money for the American Diabetes Association. So we did that. I used my vouchers to go. We flew up to Seattle, and we scouted the course scouted the ride with a rental car. And then a few weeks later, we actually did the ride, and it was, again, that was another kind of introduction to the outdoors. I still don't know how we managed to make it through that. I don't remember with him. I don't think either of us had a sleeping pad. We slept on the ground.
Right.
and that was kind of about the time when I started dreaming about, I don't know if I can go back to software. And I started on that trip. I met a guy in a cafe who asked us what we were doing. And we said, yeah, we're going from, Seattle down to San Francisco. And he said, oh man, a few weeks ago, this guy, he was riding all the way down to South America.
Wow.
This is his name, and he's got a blog about it. And I was like, no way, I can't imagine. And I just kept thinking about that guy and that trip. And when I got to San Francisco, I didn't want to end. I wanted to keep going.
Yeah.
And I went online. That was back when the only social media out was really a blog. And so he had a blog, and I connected with it. And the guy just, followed him the whole way, wrote him. He wrote me back.
Oh, wow.
And this was about the same time that, I'd gone up to Alaska with Gregg. So all these things were coming together to really kind of build this idea of doing some sort of long bicycle trip.
Right. So was it more of a? Sorry, go ahead.
And that was kind of starting to pull away from my ability to focus fully on my software sales job. Yeah.
Yeah, big time distraction. So it was more of a love for cycling that pulled you away, as opposed to you just couldn't sell anymore. Is that right?
I think so. Also, I went to the University of Oregon. I was a track and field athlete there. I did the triple jump, which is a hop, skip, jump kind of your event. But afterwards, I think my junior or senior year, I qualified for what at that point was the Olympic trials and the U.S. Nationals, where you qualify for the World Championship. So I'd become a professional track and field athlete after university, and I at the World Championship trials, I busted up my knee pretty bad, where it had to be fully rebuilt.
Yep.
And when I was doing the rehab for my knee, the physical therapist put me on a bicycle.
Oh.
And that was the way I rehabbed my knee. And so, of course, I was trying to change my mentality from going for Olympic Games. And next thing you know, I'm out just doing these weekend warrior cycling events, a year later, just hammering, kind of applying all my energy that I couldn't release on my training for jumping into cycling. And that's how I got into cycling, and then connected with the travel that I was going through on the weekends, and the idea of doing this really long bicycle trip, seemed right when I heard about it. I think that's why I hooked into it so quickly when I learned about it and my stop on that big bike trip. So
it's amazing.
I think it was a combination of really trying to get the energy that I'd been directing to trying to qualify for the Olympics, and also this wanderlust was all came together to plan this long bicycle trip. Right. And that's, I think, to get to your question, I think, probably within a month of starting that long bicycle trip, I knew I couldn't go back to selling software afterwards.
Yeah, gotcha. It's amazing how those, how those things happen too. That the kind of the worlds collide and your life totally changes and you head off in a different direction. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, it was a great time.
And we'll link to your other your website and your story about your software career and all that stuff. That's a pretty great story too. I read that a couple days ago. Yeah, interesting. So where did the inspiration come from for visual storytelling? Because it doesn't sound like you have a background in video or marketing or any of that stuff. How'd that come about?
Yeah, so that I blame all everything that's happened to me in the last few years, all on this long bicycle trip. So, and the guy
plenty of time to think.
Plenty of time to think and see and meet people, and
right.
just kind of, you learn to follow your instinct, you learn to follow your curiosity. And I actually started that trip with I just bought I think I just had a random point and shoot camera. It was terrible. And the guy I was riding with, my dear friend from college, he was a photographer. Or I think it was a passion of his was photography. He wasn't a phographer, but he had a little bit nicer camera. And I remember up in Alaska, he handed me his camera and said, "Hey man, can you snap a shot of me right in front of this glacier?" And I got so into it. I just remember the glacier was amazing, and just really conveyed what we felt that time riding our bikes in front of these giant glaciers. So I remember working so hard just to get this perfect picture and really enjoying that moment. And then afterwards, I sent the picture to the Seattle Times magazine, or Seattle Times, and they published it under their user or readers' stories or readers' trips section.
Oh, cool! Yeah.
And it was kind of accidental. And then I had a few different cycling magazines wrote me and asked me for that same picture, and then the intern at National Geographic wrote me. And I don't know how they found that, but they heard about my trip, and Nat Geo Adventure asked me to start blogging about it for them. So I would send them a few reports, and then they asked me for a higher res photo because the camera was, kind of crappy.
What's that?
And I was like, that's all she's got, man. That's maxed out. And they're like, oh, we can't publish it in the magazine. We were thinking of publishing something in the magazine. So I was like, oh wow. So I was, even back then I knew what Nat Geo was, how cool it would be to have a little shot in their adventure magazine. So I actually went out on that trip and bought a camera, point and shoot camera, the Canon Rebel, one of the first point and shoot cameras.
Cool.
Yeah. And that, and I just, like you said, a lot of time. I didn't go to school or anything. I had my friend who was with me who kind of taught me, what aperture was and shutter speed and those things. And then the great thing on the digital screen is I could just shoot, all day long during my trip. And then in the tent, I could kind of huddle down and review all the photos and just kind of self-learn.
Yeah. It's amazing how immediate. Yeah, it's amazing how immediate feedback changed photography.
Yeah, and that would have been probably pretty tough to do during film. I might not have had the patience for it. Maybe it wouldn't have worked with how I learned.
Or the time, yeah. I mean, you're on this ride. You got to send film out. They got to find you and send it back. And that would have been tough.
Yep, totally. And so then with those photos, I would do a kind of a regular email or every month or 2 months to my family and friends, and then
cool.
we did our own blog, and so it was always just to kind of basically inform my family, make sure that we're still alive, and there's always really concerned, it's a little bit black sheep type thing for me to do this in my family, and so that I guess that was the first time I started, really visual storytelling was for my friends and family, just trying to convey the trip to them and keep in touch with them through technology.
And
the early stages of social media and blogging.
Right. And when you got off that trip, did you keep up the blog and the photography and storytelling just as a hobby kind of thing? Or you got off the trip
So
and
that was
basically quit.
That was a big mistake of mine. I didn't keep up the trip log. If I could go back, I would have kept doing it. But what happened is at the end of that trip, Nat Geo offered me a scholarship to go to Jackson Hole and to their adventure store workshop, and then I hooked up with a bunch of those photographers, and they offered me some gigs for the Adventure magazine after the trip. So that's like really to that scholarship program through them. And the guy's name, his name is Rich Clarkson. He's an iconic guy.
He's amazing. Yeah.
Yeah. Incredible guy. And then Corey Rich was key in that process too. He met me along the way and helped, really encourage me. It actually taught me what a photographer was. I didn't even know photography was a profession.
Right.
After,
right.
Before the bicycle trip, and they hooked me into, photography. And Rich had kind of his most classic line that I remember through his whole mentorship and visual storytelling. And it was, a few months after my bicycle trip, maybe 6 months. And he said, you seem a bit lost, and you're kind of vagabonding around, and you have all this curiosity, but you don't really know what to do with your life. And I said, yeah, you kind of spot on there. And he's like, well, you know what we call those kind of people at National Geographic? And I'm like, oh, what's that? And he's like, we call them photographers.
That's right. Yeah.
And there's a career in doing that stuff. So
yeah.
That's what started my visual storytelling career. Him really pointing that out to me.
Yeah, he's amazing. Yeah, both him and Corey Rich. I worked at Lowpro for a while. We did some projects with those guys up at Jackson Hole. Yeah, they're great guys.
Okay, yeah. So I went to that workshop several times. They do a workshop in Jackson Hole.
Yeah.
Learned a lot from those guys.
Yeah, some great photography. And Rich is a classic. He is amazing.
He is, yeah.
He's still kicking too. I talked to one of the guys at his agency a couple months ago, I guess. He's still up and at 'em,
He is.
That's awesome.
He's still kicking. So for listeners who don't know what Rich was a director of photography at National Geographic, and he has one of the most iconic careers in photography, both as a photographer and mentoring other photographers. He's brought a lot of people into the profession who have gone on to do incredible things in their career, like editor-in-chief of National Geographic, Chris Johns, Corey Rich, some of these people that are really well-known photography came through Rich's mentorship, and he's kind of dedicated the last couple decades of his life to really mentoring people.
Yeah, and they do these workshops all around the world. I mean, you can go learn from some really iconic photographers. We'll link to that in the show notes. But it's amazing what they're doing. Yeah, he was one of the original photographers at the NCAA, Final Four tournament, and just awesome. Yeah, what a cool guy.
Yeah, and just it's a privilege to be able to hang out and have a cocktail or beer with him. And he has a lifetime of stories. I think he's 80 now, or close to 80 years old.
Something.
So.
Yeah.
And he's been with all the most incredible athletes in modern history of our country, and some of the most incredible people. So he has just stories that never stop.
Yeah, and Corey Rich is awesome in his own right as well too. He's a buddy of mine up in Tahoe. Yeah. So so was that where you got inspired to build a creative agency of your own, a production company, just working with?
Yeah, so that's where I was inspired to become a photojournalist. And the challenge there was that was 2007. So I started my career kind of the worst time ever for photography. It was before people were making money on Instagram and that whole kind of type of cash flow option for being a photographer started. And it was just when all the magazines were starting to go, under. And so I kind of struggled my way through there. I learned how to write because most magazines didn't have the budget to send a writer and photographer. So I became a writer as well. And what happened was I was doing a lot of things for brands where I would go out and negotiate with the Ministry of Tourism. They would underwrite the shoot. I'd bring all the gear. I would make hire models. I'd do all these things. And I was friends with a woman who was a kind of head honcho at an agency in LA. And I was telling her about my last photo shoot. And she's like, so you're cutting deals with the Ministries of Tourism. They're underwriting this. You're hiring models. You're doing production. She's like, that's something the agency does. You're not just showing up and pressing the button.
You're not just shooting and writing. Yeah.
And she's like, do you like doing that? And actually, after probably 5 or 6 years of being kind of a lone ranger out as a photojournalist for magazines, I really liked working with teams of people and being able to bring in, videographers and makeup artists and stylists and models. It was fun to kind of have that team on the ground and travel to these places together. And I was like, I really like it. And she's like, well, you should charge for that. You should charge for those services and not just charge like a photographer. I think at that point I was really desperate just to get any job, so I was throwing in all this stuff for free, and it was detrimental to my career. Where I was getting, people, and there's still a challenge today with photography and storytelling for a lot of people starting out.
Well, and that back end work, that's a lot of work. I mean, that's a lot of coordination and, matching schedules and finding people. I mean, that's a whole nother job in and of itself. And you were doing it all for nothing.
Exactly.
Wow.
Yeah. And so what?
Very generous of you.
What I decided to do is, after this conversation, he said, you should start your own agency.
Yeah.
And at that point, I was, fairly homeless, by choice. But I was roaming, and I looked at a few different.
That's
places
different. That's not homeless. That's not homeless. That's roaming. I've been there.
Yeah, I think roaming is part of it. Is almost required on the resume of everyone who's working in the outdoors.
Yeah, you have to have lived on the road at some point in time.
Exactly, you got to learn how to do it. So I was in a roaming phase, and actually I've been roaming for probably 6-7 years.
Good for you, right on.
Yeah, but one thing I did notice when you roam, it's really hard to build something. It seems like you're kind of always, just trying to keep afloat, right? Just kind of tugging along. So it's hard to build something. So I was looking for a base camp to build something and build the agency, build the team, surround myself with good people. And I was working quite a bit in Colombia at that time. And Colombia, Bogota in particular, has been blowing up over the last decade as a production center, film, audiovisual production center. Yeah. So the government's been giving a lot of incentives for foreign production companies to come down to Colombia. And for example, all the big Hollywood guys have been down in the last few years, Will Smith and Tom Cruise. Netflix is doing a bunch of their shows down in Colombia. And so in order to do that, create those kind of programs, the government's also been investing quite a bit in education. So there's just lots of talented people in Bogota in particular. And so I was just looking at the costs associated with that and versus, the classic place like Portland or San Francisco or New York, where most people do agencies, and
way less expensive down there. Yeah.
Yeah. And I was pretty much at that stage of totally broke photojournalist. So
that comes
I thought I could come down and bootstrap it and start it in Colombia easier than, actually,
yeah, right.
Trying to.
Yeah, it makes total sense.
Yeah.
Makes sense. And so you built that in 07, 08? When did you start the creative agency?
So the creative agency I started in 2015.
Oh, 15. Okay, got you. So still pretty new. So tell us about some of the work you guys do.
Yeah, so we work quite a bit with ministries of tourism. So we work a lot consulting and developing campaigns for ministries of tourism around the world. One reason that we're still in Colombia is because the Colombian ministry hired us to do their inbound tourism marketing campaign for this year. And basically it's been incredibly fun, really being a translator for what Colombia has to offer and, taking that to English speaking markets. And the huge challenge with Colombia is a perception issue. I mean, the first thing that, still to this day, most people think of when you talk about Colombia is, the whole narcos thing and Pablo and drugs and violence. And that's just not how it is anymore. And it hasn't been like that actually for a decade.
I was going to say that was years ago. Yeah.
Yeah, but it's still going to take a long time for Colombia to shed that reputation. So our plan is we have to create new talking points for tourism just to dilute that conversation.
Right.
And one of the ways that the government had to identify that we could do that was through talking about birds. And this sounds strange, but birding in particular. And I think one thing that Colombia suffers from is actually a positive attribute is Colombia's like one of your friends that's just good at everything. You have your buddies that are just like, they play basketball.
I played golf with one of those buddies
yesterday.
yesterday.
Golfer, they can
off the couch, kick your butt.
Kick your butt like in anything,
yep.
beer pong, all that stuff,
right?
Right,
exactly.
And so Colombia just has so many great things that it has on offer. Pacific Ocean, Caribbean. It's got the Amazon. It's got 3 spines of the Andes. It's got a little bit of everything, but it doesn't have that one thing that everyone knows, like Machu Picchu or Kilimanjaro. It doesn't have the bucket list thing.
Right.
And unfortunately, bucket lists still work. I say unfortunately because I'm not a big fan, but unfortunately they still work really well in travel marketing, right? How many people go to Peru and discover all the other great things Peru has on offer because of Machu Picchu, right?
Yeah.
And so we need to try to come up with a iconic bucket list thing for Colombia. And one thing that Colombia does completely dominate is birding, and the amount of bird species is in the country. There's more birds in Colombia than any other country. 20+% of all the world's bird species are in Colombia.
Really? Wow.
And so, so we took kind of a page from Rwanda. You go to Rwanda to see mountain gorillas. Rwanda's really on the map. And, people still talk about the, really difficult history of Rwanda, but also it's like, we could go there and see mountain gorillas, that's a pretty incredible thing. So what we've done in the last 2 years in Colombia, and we've launched it this year, is position the country as like the number one place on the planet where you can go see incredible birds.
Cool.
So if you're a birder, you come to Colombia, to check off your list. There's, just more endemic species in Colombia than almost anywhere. So you can get birds that only exist in one specific mountain range or on one slope of a mountain range.
Right.
Or you can just, max out up to 2,000 species.
Jeez, that's
pretty incredible.
Yeah, wow, that's amazing. Yeah.
Well, and then the big dream is anyone who's just curious about the outdoors can come to Colombia and like pretty much you got to go birding. You got to go out and see birds if you're in Colombia. It's just something you got to do. So the whole idea is like, Escobar and the violent stuff. But did you hear you can see some of the most killer birds on the planet when you're in Colombia?
Right.
You're just introducing those other conversation points.
Yeah, shift the narrative. Yeah, that's it. Well, and I like that too because the other thing about bucket lists these days is they're just getting loved to death. You can't. Yeah. You go to these things and you're just with these hordes of people. It's not fun. It can't be fun.
Yeah. I think.
We need to change the narrative and get people in a bunch more different places because there's so many other places on the planet. Like you say, Colombia. Totally. Who knew, right?
Yeah, who knew? And also the great thing about, I think, activities like birding or cycling is that you're dispersing people throughout the country. Right. It's not like you just show up on one, they don't just let the birds out the cage every morning at sunrise on this one, observation deck, right?
Right.
You got to actually get out and disperse yourself and split up. It doesn't work when there's 100 people standing together. So another thing I love about these types of activities, birding, is that the cash trickles into the community really, really well.
Oh, right. So, the local community's benefits. That's true.
Yep. And then you really are forced to do things that you wouldn't normally do on a typical vacation. So, you wake up, you go up to the top of a ridge line at 6 a.m. and you're watching sunrise, and that's an incredible experience. But the reason you're there is because that's when the birds, do most frequent that area. Whereas normally probably you wouldn't be waking up at 5 a.m. But, you're out, you're experiencing things, you're experiencing places that you wouldn't normally see on the, get you off the beaten path.
Yeah, in a different way. Yeah,
in a legit way,
Yeah, very cool. And you launched that just this year?
Yeah, we launched it this year. It's been a really great campaign. The campaign was, we call it, a campaign that talks into several different channels. So it's an integrated campaign where we did a feature-length documentary film, hour long, and then 5 short documentary films, and tons of assets for social media and sharing. And we brought people to Colombia who are kind of key thought leaders in bird tourism.
Awesome.
We worked with the Audubon Society. We worked with Cornell. We worked with an app called eBird, which this is actually eBird is something since this is a podcast that talks about the outdoors and working outdoors. eBird's something that most people don't know about who aren't into birding, but it's just, for me, it's one of the most incredible pieces of technology I've witnessed. There's 3.5 million people that use this app called eBird.
Wow.
And basically what you do is you report birds when you see them when you're out in the field. And so think about 3.5 million people dispersed throughout the globe reporting bird species and what you can do with that data. So now, eBird is managed by Cornell University, and they're looking at that data. And when you can understand holistically where birds are during certain times of year, you learn a lot about the current state of the planet.
I'll bet I have a good friend of mine that's got a degree in birding. I think it's from Cornell, and they're always traveling all over the world to see birds. And they also do this thing though, where what I learned from them is when a storm rolls in, these birds on their traditional migratory path get blown off course. So you might see this unique exotic bird that has no business being out in the San Francisco Bay. It's there this week, and there's this website where this email goes out to all these people who follow it, and there's a such and such out in the bay one time. It drives all these people to go see this unique bird. Is it like that, or maybe that's what it is?
Well, this would allow you to understand where those bird sightings are. So if you want to go see that bird, you're going to see everyone who's seen it report it.
Got you.
And then they have a sister app actually that's like Shazam. Shazam for listening to music.
Yeah.
So it's like Shazam for birds. So you go in and you can, and you're not sure what that species is. So what it'll do is cross-reference what you kind of tick in the app as what you've noted about the bird.
Yeah.
It'll cross-reference that with its sister app, eBird, and basically predict what bird that species that is at that time.
Very cool.
So if you're a novice birder, it's like having a bird guide in your pocket. But
yeah, it's awesome.
I just think it's probably, as far as an outdoor or travel app, no one knows about it, and I think it's one of the more powerful apps.
Yeah, well, we'll link to that in the show notes too. Yeah. Well, and it's amazing to me hanging out with these buddies of mine. I had no idea how huge birding is. It's amazing how many people do it and the travel that they go to do it. It's just phenomenal.
I'm terrible at birding. I'm colorblind.
Yeah, me too.
I'm the last guy on the bird. I'm terrible.
They all sound the same.
Yeah, but these guides that we worked with a lot of biologists and guides putting this campaign together, and it's like they speak another language. When we're out in the field, they close their eyes and they're just hearing things. And based on the bird song they're listening to, they know so much about what's happening in the world around them. They know what fruits. There's a bird in a specific area because it's feeding, so that means that something else is happening.
Right, yeah.
It's just an incredible way to interpret, your planet and interpret the outdoors. So it's a skill that I think for every outdoors, enthusiast, it's an incredible skill to pick up.
Yeah, I agree. And you can do it anywhere. I mean, it's changed we go day hiking a lot together, and it's changed the way we go day hiking now because it also now involves birdie, and you got to bring binoculars. It's very cool. I mean, you see things that's like you had no idea they were there, and now that you're there and you're listening and hearing and looking, it's pretty cool.
One other thing when you say cool, because I think when I first started researching this, whenever I used the word birding, cool would not be a word that anyone would use to describe it. You have this kind of stereotype of the classic English birder, which would be like retired grandparent.
Yep.
Definitely not cool.
Yeah.
And what we discovered in Colombia is because of the history of Colombia, birding is not something that anyone could do until the last decade or so, because most places where you'd see birds were completely off limits because of the war.
Yeah.
And that means that most people in Colombia who are birders or into birding or guides or biologists are very young. So it's a totally young culture, and there's a guy who helped us a lot in this project called Diego Calderon. He was the star of our documentary. This guy rides around in a BMW GS Enduro with binoculars. He's got he's super cool. When he shows up in a small town in Colombia, the kids all know who he is. That's the bird master, and
cool.
He comes in with clients from all around the world, and if you're an English speaking bird guide in Colombia, the demand's so high.
Oh, I can imagine
right now that you're actually seeing in the community is like small communities view
he's a rainmaker
biologists and birds that come in. Yeah, like a rainmaker, like a football star, like a soccer star. Kids follow them around. They're like rock stars,
That's cool. Yeah.
And it's people actually stop him in the street and ask him for his autograph.
Oh, that's awesome. That's very cool.
So the whole idea is let's make birding cool. It is cool. It's in Colombia. It's something that's very cool.
Yeah.
And people get that vibe. And even when I talk to retirees when they come to visit Colombia, those those folks get a bad rap, but when you're a 70-year-old grandparent and you're in Colombia in the jungle birding, I mean, that's pretty rad.
Yeah,
it's pretty cool.
It's
so
awesome.
Like, there's nothing to me that's dorky about that.
Yeah, no, yeah, it's awesome. Yeah, no, my buddies go, like I say, they travel. I'm sure they've been to Colombia. I have to follow up with them, but yeah, it's becoming a main outdoor activity. It's no longer a fringe activity. It's now a main activity. People actually go to places to do that, or it's one of the things they add to their list of things to do when they're going on some adventure. It's great.
Right.
Yeah. So what do you love most about your work?
So I would say that, when I came back from my bicycle trip and I became a photographer, like I couldn't go back to my other job. I didn't really know what I was going to do.
Right.
So I think this whole work, this agency that I have now, is something that I invented to continue pursuing my passions that I really didn't know where I could go apply for this job.
Yeah.
I was during the time when times were tough as a photographer, I was kind of like, what's my plan B? And I started searching around for jobs, and I was like, there's nothing out there that would really fulfill this kind of curiosity and wanderlust and love for telling stories that I have. So I just, with the agency thing, I kind of invented that.
Created your own job.
That's the thing I love most about it. And another thing that I think is now in the last year or two has really brought me the most amount of joy would be, we have over 20 people now at the agency.
Oh, great.
And yeah, and you see, I see people coming into our company and going out and on shoots and doing edits. And I really see them growing and falling in love with our projects. Like going back, we'll go back real quick to Prim, but everyone in our office in Bogota is a birder now. They go out on the weekends on their own. They're out birding. And then we also work quite a bit in cycling. And one of our guys just got like 8th place in the big Colombian cycling race. When he started with us, he didn't even have a bicycle.
Wow, right on.
So it's great to see people like falling in love with the outdoors and finding, discovering new passions through this job. Because I really believe that, your job should also be a gateway to, or should facilitate like your real life.
Yeah.
That happens outside of your job. And so it's fun to see people just, really clicking with the job, and it's also inspiring them to go do and pursue new things
when you can
in their life. And that's just been awesome.
Yeah, when you can blend both of those things, it's pretty fabulous. It's pretty unique. Yeah.
Yeah.
How about a couple?
And that gives me a lot of joy to see that.
Well, it's got to it's got to fill your heart, and it's got to be fun as well, because you guys get to work together and play together and do cool things, and that's awesome.
Yeah.
What are a couple of the biggest challenges?
Yeah, so I think there's generic challenges that pretty much anyone starting a company that has.
Sure. Yeah.
It is weird. Like, this is
cash flow.
Book, it's not in the books, but like, cash flow and stress. Like the first few years until you can bring on people to help you in certain areas, the founder has to worry about everything. You don't have to worry about everything, but you tend to worry about everything. Yeah. So there's a lot of anxiety because you tend to mix you tend to lose the line between your personal life and your company. It all kind of blends together versus back in the day when I was working in software, I could, I cruise in, I do my job, I do my sales, and I cruise out, and the owner or the CEO of that company worry about whatever he or she needed to worry about. And all I had to do was focus on my job. Yeah. And when I was out of the office, I was out of the office, right?
Right. Yeah. Turn it off.
I was doing my thing. But the biggest challenge, I think, was trying to build those, parameters into your life to try to create separation when really, when you're a founder of a company or start a small company, it's all one thing.
Yeah.
And then, of course, cash flow is tricky. And I think for me in particular, starting a company in a developing world, in a country that's like completely, coming through a very war-torn and perhaps a decade ago was one of the most violent places on the planet, and also one of the biggest centers for money laundering.
Right.
Is really, really hard. I mean, the laws in Colombia are absolutely nuts. So while it's been incredible with the talent and the people and just being in Colombia as an inspiration, the paperwork is really tough to navigate and totally counter everything we we do in the United States.
Yeah.
And
have you been able to influence that at all? I mean, working with some of these tourism agencies, have you been able to, expose them to other ways and maybe get some changes going on to help them, make their businesses more efficient for both of you?
Yeah, I think most the time it's one thing we have been able to do is in Colombia, you cannot if you hire a freelancer or work with an independent company, they are required, or you are required to verify that they've paid their taxes and health and taken care of everything before you pay them.
Wow.
So let's say we're working with you, and you're going to do some incredible job of guiding a group of clients in Colombia, and your fee to us is going to be $100. So you send us that invoice for $100, and then we send you a piece of paper that says before we pay you $100, you need to go and prepay your tax on $100 and show us your valid receipt for paying that tax before we can pay you.
Holy cow!
Yeah.
So lots of paperwork, lots of old school paperwork, validation.
Mm-hmm.
Wow, that makes sense.
But if you understand the reason why,
that makes sense.
All makes sense. And one thing in our industry is that Colombia typically is very, very casual about that. So you have foreign operators coming down and working with people, and they're paid under the table,
taking advantage of it.
And the problem is if you're paid under the table and something happens to you, you're really hosed. Like it'd be the equivalent of hiring a guide in the States who doesn't have health care, and you're not really interested in them having health care, and then putting them into a situation where they need to guide clients down an extremely tricky mountain bike run.
Yeah.
And they crash.
Hurt. Yeah.
And they're hurt, and then they're stuck with all the healthcare payments. I mean, for me, that's not responsible.
Right. Yeah.
And I don't think it's responsible. I think if foreign operators are in Colombia and foreign people are in Colombia producing or doing adventure activities or working in the outdoor industry, they should be. And you have great local people. You should do everything in your power to make sure that they're taken care of.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah. Well, that kind of makes sense on their side though, because from where they come from with the wars and the lack of trust, and they're just rebuilding everything. It just.
Yep.
Yeah. Huh,
exactly.
Yeah. And is it are the people pretty savvy and they understand the process? Because a lot of times you go to these other countries, like you go to Africa, and some of these processes, they're in place, but man, they're just so broken. Are they pretty buttoned up down there?
So yeah, I think people are very organized. People in Colombia are really business savvy.
Okay, so they're not trying to shortcut
I would say
the system.
It depends. Yeah, it depends on the region. Like if we're working in Bogota, everyone gets it.
Got you. Yeah.
But if you're going to more remote places that are maybe I guess more war torn, that haven't seen government assistance for a long time,
yeah,
they're pretty weary. Like let's say hiring someone in a remote region of Colombia who was a decade ago part of the paramilitary, and you're like, hey man, if you paid your health and pension and all that stuff and taxes before we do $100, and the guy's just going to be like, what are you talking about?
Yeah, no way.
Like, I don't pay taxes.
Yeah. I haven't paid it. I'm not going to pay it.
Yeah, not going to pay it. Actually, we did have someone say, I'd rather die than pay these taxes.
Wow. Interesting.
And pretty bold thing. So part of our whole process working down there is educating people on the process.
Yeah, but
so here you have this gringo educating locals on the process and just saying we want to do this because we want to make sure you're taken care of. We're going to work for you and explain that. So most people are super receptive and even educating local tour operators who haven't done that stuff in the past.
Wow.
And that's all. It's been really interesting. So I'd say that's definitely a challenge. That
it's gonna be a huge challenge.
We have a company in the U.S. too, and we don't go through those things in the U.S.
Right. Let me show you how to do this.
Yeah.
So let's shift gears a little bit. What other outdoor activities do you participate in? You still cycle a lot, or do you get a chance to?
Yeah. So when I get a chance, I do cycle. I go through seasons. It's interesting being raised in the Pacific Northwest in Seattle. Their seasons would dictate your activities. Yeah. But in the tropics, it's always the same season.
Yeah.
So I usually get into cycling for a few months out of the year, and I do that. I've really fallen in love with hiking. There's some incredible hikes outside of Bogota. Bogota is where we're based, where I live.
Oh, cool.
Most of the time, and that's 8,650 feet in altitude in Bogota, so Summit County altitude.
Nice.
and just outside of Bogota, you can be up 11, 12, 13,000 feet pretty quick in these páramos, which are like high altitude Andean moorlands. It's like your Dr. Seuss landing it up there. And I go up there. I have a street dog that was given to me and with a lot of energy. So that's a great way for me to get out regularly on the weekend to go hiking in these moorlands.
Very cool. Sounds beautiful.
It's really incredible place. So I get out and do that quite a bit. And then I would say, so between cycling and that, and then just, standard kind of gym workouts I do in the park. And I travel a lot too. So that's a big challenge to try to fit and kind of keep ready when you're traveling a lot.
Really tough. Yeah. I've been there. Yeah. Do you have any suggestions or advice for folks wanting to get into the outdoor biz, or what you guys do, production biz?
Yeah. So, man, it's awesome because there's one thing I love about this industry is that most people who are involved for a reason. It's not like, this was my major in college, so I just did it,
Stumbled into it, and it's been a job for 20 years, and I just do it. Yeah, you're right.
Rarely stumbled.
We're there for a
reason.
reason.
Stumbled into this industry.
Right.
There for a reason. A very conscious decision because you love this industry. You love what you do, and that's just awesome because there's nothing like, back then in software, it was one of the reasons I got out of software. I'd be in a room doing a presentation, and you could just read the room, be 15 people who just did not want to be there. People just not stoked about the job part of their life, not passionate about, not stoked to be there. And that just kind of sucks the energy out of the room, where I've never had that happen in this industry. Everyone is super enthusiastic, conscious decision. So I would say one thing, for people interested is understand you're going to be a lot with other people who are very passionate, and passionate people recognize other passionate people. So make sure there's something you love to do.
Yeah,
you're really into, because you're going to be surrounded by a bunch of people like you.
Yeah.
I'd say patience. Yeah, patience would be another thing. There's the other challenge is when you find these passionate industries, there's a lot of people knocking on the door who want to get involved. So I would say, in general, the pay grade is a little bit lower than, for example, some of the more boring, like pharmaceutical company or something. The same, like a marketing role, the killer travel operator is going to be probably a little lower paying than a pharmaceutical marketing person, right?
That's true.
And but with that said, one thing I would say is a downer for me on this industry is I feel that there are some people that take advantage of that demand, and especially target young people to do stuff for free.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, hey, we do these incredible trips, or hey, we do this stuff. If you want to work with us, you got to do it for free. Mm-hmm. I don't like that. I think if you're going to have someone work for you, unpaid internships or internships where you're actually doing a job and you're not getting paid, or it's not leading to a potential job in an organization, I'm not fond of.
Yeah.
I see that probably a little too much in this industry, just because it's sexy. It's really sexy. The outdoor industry is a very sexy thing. You're traveling around the world. You're working with cool brands. You're out doing things. So I would say, hold your ground and understand your value and understand the value you're bringing to the organization. And demand that someone compensate you for your work. Don't I'd say resist the free stuff. Or if you're going to do an internship, internships are a great way into organizations.
Yep.
But make sure it's a real internship and that it goes two ways. You're not just slaving away for free. That you're learning from, internship is about you learning.
Yeah. And you're getting some form of compensation, whether it's actual, dollars or college credits or something. I mean, learning is great. We all want to learn, but at the same time, you can't eat jackets. One of a photography buddies of mine said, there's all these people wanting you to shoot on spec. Oh yeah, we'll give you some clothes. Well, that's great. I can't eat those, so.
Yeah. I would say, speaking of that example, I learned that, one of the reasons I started, another reason I started this agency is because in the photography industry, it's really common that people comp you gear for your photos, and in the travel industry, they comp you trips, and it's just like, I can't, and it's really hard to turn down. But if you're going to be a professional and this is going to be your career, you can't do that. You have to put your foot down. And
I think you nailed it. Stand up for your value. I mean, you're providing, but that puts pressure on you to make sure that you have, strong, good quality craft and strong images or, guide experience or whatever it is. You've got to be able to deliver. But once you achieve that status, however you got it, stand your ground because you earned it. So.
Totally, 100%.
Yeah, cool. Do you have any daily routines you use to keep your sanity? Meditate? Sounds like you get a lot of exercise.
Yeah. So I exercise in the morning, 3 or 4 days a week, always in the morning. If I do it late at night, it tends to keep me awake.
Oh, yeah.
And then I would say I'm not like everyday meditation, but probably 3 days a week. I do 10 minutes of just breathing in the morning.
Oh, cool.
And then the meditation I discovered in the last couple of years was with this, I think I mentioned already that a client of mine just brought over a street dog one day and dropped it off at my house.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't like a conscious thing that I wanted a dog, but this dog was completely wild, Latin American street dog, and it took me a long time to kind of get her trained and educated. They say down in Spanish, educated. And it turns out that one day there's another dog in the park who's a Frisbee dog.
Oh.
And she just took off after the Frisbee. So I ordered these kind of custom Frisbees from the States, and Amazon had them sent down, and now she's a Frisbee dog. So in the morning, I take her out for 20 minutes of Frisbee, and it really is kind of my new meditation where I just toss a Frisbee and super connected with her, and
very fun.
And leave my phone off, and that's my morning routine. I love that.
I love it. That's great. Yeah. Do you have any favorite books? Do you give books as gifts?
Yeah. So let's see. I'll tell you 2 books I've received as gifts lately.
Yeah, that's good.
Sure. 2 books I received as gifts I appreciated. One of them is called "It Doesn't Have to Be Crazy at Work."
Oh, I like it.
And I mean, I don't subscribe to the entire book, but basically it's about creating within a company organization a balance between work and life, and that dispelling the myth that employees are like family, because they're not. If you look at Silicon Valley, people get fired and laid off all the time. You don't fire or lay off your own family, right?
Right.
So it's about creating a work environment where people can be as happy as possible outside of work and in work, right?
That's a good one.
I like that. And then another one, I went to University of Oregon, and I was able to meet my coach's coach, Bill Bowerman, who's the founder of Nike.
Oh, yeah.
And then Phil Knight would support our team. The whole Nike was born out of the University of Oregon track team.
Yep.
And so Shoe Dog was sent to me by a friend that basically explains how Nike started, and this put me at ease quite a bit, because I didn't know that basically Nike was totally bankrupt until they went public.
I know, isn't that an amazing story? The early on part of that. God, it's incredible.
Yeah.
It's
incredible.
It's a great story. Yeah.
Yeah. And then another thing that I realized through that is, and also, these are both kind of small business books, but
yeah.
Phil Knight attributed a lot of success to his wife and his partner.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
I mean, she kept him sane, and she kept everything moving. He was living off, like, I think $50 a week for a long time.
Right.
Their credit cards maxed out,
Yeah, she kept the home life stable so he could go do the crazy stuff to build Nike.
Yeah. Dirt broke, man. Dirt broke for the longest time.
Long time, yeah.
Yeah. And that was really interesting. And then I'd say growing up, the book that inspired me wanting to travel is, of course, The Hobbit. I'm reading that. I remember just going off on that trip. That's
cool.
And then I was a tropical fish collector. Growing up, I had all these fish tanks from exotic fish from around the world.
Yeah.
And I get these books about these guys that would go out and find the fish in the Amazon and stuff. And it was kind of a travel journal and collecting fish. So
very cool. I like it. Yeah, those are good. I don't think anybody's had a fish collecting book on the show yet. That's a first. As we wrap up here, is there anything else you'd like to say to our audience or ask of our audience?
I would say, one thing that I always come to terms with is that I now own a production company and ad agency, and that's something that during my time on the bike, when I say I was kind of a hippie vagrant on the bike, rejecting materialism and all that stuff, I'm involved in some of the things that I was rejecting during that experience that actually transitioned me to be doing this right now.
Interesting.
So I'm always thinking of the most responsible way to do this stuff. And we call it being good actors in our place of origin.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, when we're selling or we're creating, some sort of inspiration for people to buy goods and products, is there a way we can give back to the place of origin where we're like setting these campaigns or be good actors in our place of origin? So, I guess my question is what are some things that you've seen that campaigns connected to advertising where you've seen it done responsibly? We talked about Patagonia being a very responsible brand, being very honest, but is there anything else that is responsible? If I'm doing this, I want to do it in the best way possible, most responsible way possible, and that's something I'm always mulling on almost every day.
Yeah, so if you guys have any ideas out there for Gregg, how can they find out? Where can they reach you to follow up on that?
Yeah, Instagram. Our account's called WhereNext, the life. Where is in WHERENEXT, life.
Okay.
And from our Instagram account, you can DM us or contact us, or our website as well as wherenext.com.
Cool. Well, we'll link to all that in the show notes too. Yeah, that's good. It's one of the things I've been talking about with a few people on the podcast too. It's surprising to me how few B Corps there are in the outdoor adventure space. I mean, they're growing and they're becoming more and more, and I realize they're still pretty new, but you think with all the things that, the outdoor industry and adventure travel industry are about, some of the core values, there would be more. But it's nice to see that there are more and more coming now. But, we all need to do more, especially now because, man, we're running out of time. So.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah,
exactly.
Cool. Well, great, Gregg. It's been great talking to you. If you find yourself in California on the Eastern Sierra sometime, definitely give a shout. Or we'll probably connect at a trade shows where we'll meet.
Yeah, that'd be great. I'd love that.
Right on. All right, I appreciate it.
Okay, thank you.
Yep, bye-bye. If you want more of the Outdoor Biz Podcast, you can subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. Be sure to go to the outdoorbizpodcast.com where you find all the episodes, show notes, and much, much more. Until next time, be sure to make time to get outside.